So the first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. Do I have any nominations, please, members?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to propose Councillor Neil Tungate as chairman of this hearing.
And I'm happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tungate.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. This is a licence hearing to determine an application to vary the premises licence in respect of Cowshot Pop-Up Hotel at Cowshot. I'd like to welcome members of the licensing subcommittee, officers, the applicant and objectors to today's meeting. I'm Councillor Neil Tungate, chairman of this subcommittee hearing. Welcome to members of the public and press who may be viewing the meeting live on YouTube. The broadcast will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. I would remind those in attendance to use your microphone when speaking and remember to switch it off once you have finished speaking. Please switch any mobile devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For the benefit of those listening to the meeting online, I will now call the name of each subcommittee member and the officers and ask them to introduce themselves. As I previously mentioned, I'm Councillor Neil Tungate, chairman of the subcommittee. Jeff Blunden.
Yes, good morning, Chairman. I'm Councillor Geoffrey Blunden. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Chairman. Yes, my name is Councillor Rebecca Clark. Thank you.
Good morning, Davis, legal advisor.
Andy Rogers, Democratic Services.
Krista Ferguson, licensing manager.
Thank you, everybody. First, I need to check and make sure that I and none of my colleagues sitting today have any interest in the matter which would preclude us from sitting to determine the application. Do members have any interest to declare? No, none declared. I now need to check whether all the parties are present, and if not, whether they have told the council that they are not attending. I've been given a list as follows. Please indicate you're present, and when you speak during the meeting, please repeat your name. I understand Simon Verdon from Landmark Trust is here.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Alexis McAvoy.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Philip Day, solicitor.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Mark Sorrell from Destination Pop-Up Limited, the operators.
Good morning. Yes, here.
And I believe Claire Fulton, Alex Brooke and Chris Bailey are here from Peppermint Bars.
Claire Fulton's not. I'm Alex Brooke.
Okay,
This
thank
is
you.
Chris. We are here.
Thank you. Not attending are C. Cochrane of the National Park Authority and J. Ward. Those who have not indicated whether they will be attending were J. Bryant, R. Gray, Mr. and Mrs. N. Hunt and J. Banting. As some parties have not attended, we now have to decide whether to hold the hearing or adjourn to another date. I propose that in the public interest the hearing be held in these parties' absence, and we will consider their written representations. Are members agreed? Thank you. Those absent will be listed in the decision notice. I now wish to establish the order of events for the hearing. All parties have been sent the procedure for the hearing. In brief, the procedure is as follows. First, I will ask the legal advisor if there are any issues that require clarification. Secondly, I will ask the licensing manager to present her report. I will then ask the applicant's side to present their case. After this, I will give the objectors the opportunity to ask questions of the applicants, and I must stress this is questions only, not a submission at that point. The subcommittee will then have the opportunity to ask questions. Then I will ask the objectors to present their case. After this, the applicants and then the subcommittee will have the opportunity to ask the objectors questions. I will then ask the objector and the applicants to sum up their cases. The hearing will then close to enable the subcommittee to determine the matter in private. The decision will be given within 5 working days. Before I proceed, may I take it that all parties are in agreement with the procedure as submitted, please?
Philip Day. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Simon Verdon, yes.
Thank you. Are you happy with the procedure, Alexis?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, before we begin, I will now ask the legal advisor if there are any issues that require clarification.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mark Sorrell, Director of Destination Pop-Up Limited, has submitted an application for a time-limited licence for a new premises under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003. In accordance with Section 18 of the Licensing Act, Where relevant representations have been made to the licensing authority in response to a premises licence application, the licensing authority must hold a hearing to consider them. Having regard to those relevant representations, the licensing authority may take such steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, and those steps are outlined for members of the subcommittee and the parties in the report at page 5 of the pack, paragraph 8.1. The report outlines for the parties that a number of the representations received by the licensing authority raise issues relating, amongst others, to increased traffic and parking, as well as an objection from the National Park Authority in respect of planning issues. However, I must remind members of the subcommittee and the parties that the application to be determined today relates to the licensable activities applied for only, and the impact of those licensable activities on the 4 licensing objectives, which are set out in the report at page 4 of the pack at paragraph 4.1. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask the licensing manager, Krista Ferguson, to present her report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This hearing has been organised to ask elected members to determine an application for a new time-limited premises licence for a pop-up hotel created at Calshot. Premises licence to permit the sale of alcohol at the restaurant has been submitted to support the glamping facilities of the site for residents and a limited number of off-site guests to the restaurant. Due to the temporary nature of the hotel, the application seeks only to cover the period where residents are on site for the glamping experience. The application has been correctly advertised as required under the Act, and during the 28-day statutory representation period, the licensing authority received 8 representations against the application. Some representations make reference to parking and road issues following the consumption of alcohol, although these are not matters that can be considered under the Act and at this hearing. However, reference has also been made to the objections to the likely effect of the application on the licensing objectives through the sale of alcohol. Members are therefore asked to determine this application in light of the objections received, as this application cannot be determined by officers under delegated powers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask the applicants, Mr. Day with his clients, please present their case.
Philip Day, thank you very much, Chair. You have the application before you in the papers. It is, as has already been said, an application for a time-limited licence from the moment that you grant it, assuming, of course, that you do, until the 30th of August of this year. It is for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises only, and the premises has been defined by reference to a map or drawing showing the extent of the site that is to be included within the licence, and that does not include all of it. So, for example, the car park is not included therein. It is for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises only between the hours of 11 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. The premises technically are open to the public 24 hours a day because it is being used as a camping or a glamping site. Regulated entertainment is not included, nor is late night refreshment or any other licensable activity. The application has been submitted subject to a number of proposed conditions that you can see on pages 17 and 18 of your main pack, all of which are designed and intended to promote all 4 of the licensing objectives. You may choose to attach a great deal of weight to the fact that none of the responsible authorities, including in particular, but not limited to, the police and environmental health officers concerned with matters of public safety and public nuisance in particular, they have raised no objection whatsoever to this application. Sometimes it's the case that when one submits an application, the police or environmental health or somebody else may come back and effectively ask you to tweak it. We'd like a few more conditions because this hasn't been addressed, that hasn't been addressed, or whatever. In this case, there have been no such requests at all. Now, the application was put in a little late. the advice that was originally given to my clients, Destination Pop-Up Limited, was incorrect. And I only came into this late in the day, which is why the application was submitted when it was, and not at least 2 months before the opening date of the site. You will be aware from the report and other information before you that in actual fact the site opened on the 9th of July of this year. What we did was to submit a series of temporary event notices which have allowed the premises to sell alcohol to those who are there every day of the week up until 11 o'clock at night, except Mondays since the site has opened. And you may think that that is of some significance in this particular case, because it allows you to address the impact that the sale of alcohol has had, or the lack of impact, as we would put it, on local residents in particular, and the area in general. You will also be aware that any temporary event notice has to be served on the police and on the environmental health officers, who would be most primarily concerned, and they can serve a counter notice if they consider that to allow the temporary event, in other words, the sale of alcohol, to go ahead would undermine any of the licensing objectives. Then they can object to it, and there would then have to be a hearing to determine it. The fact of the matter is that with the benefit of now perfect hindsight, neither the police nor environmental health have chosen to object to any of the temporary event notices that have been given to date, and that says something, I would suggest, in favour of granting this application. I would add that because of the restrictions on temporary event notices, they can only last for 168 hours at a time, in other words, a week. You cannot back-to-back them. In other words, there has to be a gap of at least 24 hours between the end of one notice and the start of the next. So what's been happening, other than the original weekend, which covered the Thursday to the Sunday, Mondays have been dry days, in that no alcohol has been sold on site, but those staying there have been advised that on those days they are able and allowed to bring their own alcohol onto site, something which is not permitted at other times. The other point about that is that there is a maximum number of days that you can cover in any calendar year with regard to temporary event notices, as I'm sure you're aware, and that is 21, and we ran out of our 21 days on the 1st of August. So what's been done is that a separate temporary event notice has been given for a temporary structure that's outside the area that you are concerned with. It's in the car park, it's therefore in a different place, and further temporary event notice has been given, which is currently in operation, but that means that if somebody is in the restaurant and they want a glass of wine or a bottle of beer to go with their meal or whatever, then somebody has to trek all the way from the restaurant to the car park in order to collect that and then bring it back. And that's what's been happening Tuesday, Wednesday, and will happen today, unless you decide to grant this application and give your decision today. And I would urge you, please, if at all possible, not to make full use of the 5 working days that you have to make a decision, but to give your decision as soon as you possibly can. In the interest of total transparency, I gave a further temporary event notice earlier this week to start next Tuesday, just in case you wanted to take the full 5 working days, etc. So that is the position with regard to the application and what has happened. Can I then address briefly the various objections that have been raised in the hope that it would assist you? What I endeavoured to do was to summarise all of the objections in literally a few words to indicate who had raised that particular issue and then to comment on it and to seek to respond to it. And those are all set out in the document that was served some time ago, I think, as additional papers. And you will also see in there that I took a number of photographs of the site and the immediate surrounding area so that you have a better idea of what it all looks like and how it operates and so on and so forth. Be pleased to say that there have been no issues. The only one matter that appears to have come to light is that somebody damaged the fence, as was pointed out by the Landmark Trust. My understanding, if I'm correct, is that that section of the beach is private. However, it is the case that people visiting the beach, and indeed some people who live in the locality, tend to ignore the fact that it's a private beach and wander along there. And it does have a reputation at the far end as being somewhere where naturists are attracted to and gather. And there are occasions where things happen on the beach, and indeed, only a couple of days ago, some young people not associated with the site at all lit bonfires on the beach. That was noted by the 24-hour security that is in operation at the site, and one of the security chaps went down and spoke to the young people concerned and persuaded them that this was not a good idea, much to the relief of people who were in some of the beach huts that were down there. And of course, had it not been for the presence of the site, then that wouldn't have happened. In terms of matters of law, I have summarised the position as I see it at the end of the comments that I made with regard to the various objectors. I don't propose to take you through my comments line by line. I'm sure you will have read all of the papers in advance, and I only mention it really for the record, etc. But there is a presumption, as I'm sure you're aware, in favour of grant of a licence, unless there is some evidential basis that satisfies you, on the balance of probabilities, that one or more of the licensing objectives would be undermined if you were to grant the licence. And of course, although the police and environmental health haven't said anything or commented about the conditions that are proposed, it is open to you to attach further conditions if you think it, the word used to be necessary, it's now, the word is appropriate to do so. A subtle but important difference that came about a few years ago. You have, as I've already said, the benefit of hindsight, knowing what has happened and the way in which it has operated, and against that background, and in the light of everything that has been submitted to you in writing, I would invite you to grant the application as applied for. I would mention one tiny final point. The application named the proposed designated premises supervisor as Mr. Alexander Brooke. At that time, this was before the site was open, we weren't sure who would actually be responsible for running the bars and so on. And if you are minded to grant this application, then I will, as soon as I get back to my computer, be making an application to appoint Mr. Bailey, who sits in the middle, as the designated premises supervisor. Mr. Bailey and his colleague are from Peppermint Bars, and they have vast experience in running bars at pop-up events, at festivals, at showgrounds and so on, temporary structures. They come in and they organise it. In this case, Mr. Bailey has been on site pretty well since the day it opened, and he will be in day-to-day charge there, and we will make the application to have him appointed as the DPS, if you're minded to grant this application. The four of us are here to answer any questions that you or those sitting opposite may have, but subject to that, I don't propose to say anything further to you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Do any objectors have questions for the applicants?
Simon Verdon. We've heard about your expertise in running bars and such other facilities, but if you cannot get your licensing application in on time, how do we actually know you'll be able to run this bar adequately?
You have the benefit of hindsight. This bar has been in operation every day since the 9th of July, other than on Mondays, where people have still been able to consume alcohol, and there hasn't been any issue or any problem. That's how we know.
Simon Verdon. Well, I have to disagree with that because we've had our fence damaged and we had to clear up a whole pile of broken glass. Now, these things do happen from time to time, but it was rather surprising that we should find such damage to our property when for a number of years we've not experienced anything like that. And that involved us in not a large cost. It was about £250, but it involved 3 people and quite a lot of time and effort for us to actually correct that and to protect our building. It would appear that the increased activity brought about by people coming down late at night, having had good dinners and enjoyed your bars, have led to these problems.
Well, Philip Day, I'm not sure there was a question there that I need to answer.
I think the question really is that what happens to our building is almost a direct result of what you are doing within your bars. And although you may stop selling alcohol at 11:30 at night, there is a tremendous enthusiasm to go and walk along that part of the beach. And as a result of that, then people find other things to do, which invariably means that we suffer damage as a result of that. And I'm not seeing that you're actually managing that bar to protect and preserve our building as a result of what you're providing.
I could interject there. I think you're making a statement there, Mr. Verdon, rather than asking a question, which is probably best reserved for you all. Any other questions of the applicants?
Can I ask one thing, Chairman? You did stress the fact that the licence doesn't cover the car park, implying that the car park is a safer area away from the restaurant area. Yet, because of your TENS licence, you're allowing people to go and purchase drink in the car park. Not quite sure how those two fit together.
Right. The application for the premises licence is for on sales only within the site that is defined according to the plan that was attached to the premises licence application and which appears on page 21. Okay? So any alcohol that is purchased pursuant to this premises licence or previously pursuant to the temporary event notices can only be consumed within that area. For technical reasons, the temporary event notice that has been given to cover the temporary unit in the car park is for off sales only. So in other words, you can't drink at that unit, you've got to take it away, the intention being that people then take it away to the area within the red line. I would emphasise that without that facility, then in practical terms, my clients would have to allow people who are camping on site to bring their own alcohol, which of course they can buy a great deal more cheaply from supermarkets or off licenses than if they are compelled to buy it on site. And there can then be no control over their consumption of that, save to the extent that if anybody is guilty of antisocial behaviour or whatever, the on-site security, 24 hours, are instructed to deal with that, as indeed they dealt with the incident on the beach a couple of nights ago that did not involve anybody who was staying on the site.
I do understand about the temporary events licence. However, you do allow people on a Monday to buy alcohol off-site. So, you know, it is happening.
With respect, part of the reason that an application has been made for a premises licence is so that we can stop that from happening. That's the reason.
I understand what you're saying, but the fact is, it is happening.
Well, that again is an assertion, Councillor McAvoy, not a question. Do you have another question, Mr. Verdon?
Can you describe your security arrangements that you already discussed? Frequency, numbers of people, extent of where they're sort of checking?
I'll ask Mr. Sorrell to answer that.
Yes, we have 2 security on from 7 o'clock in the evening till 7 o'clock in the morning, and 1 security person during the day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And both are tasked with regular patrols of the beach, which we've had feedback from the beach hut owners that they're grateful for, to stop, not we believe our guests, but other guests who are perhaps entering into antisocial behaviour from doing so on the beach. As Philip mentioned, our security guard moved on a few guys who had lit fires on the beach a couple of nights ago that weren't from our site. It was my understanding, actually, in speaking to people and beach hut owners, that historically there has been, especially last year post-lockdown, a fair amount of antisocial behaviour on the beach, obviously unrelated to the pop-up because we weren't there then. But perhaps you didn't see that effect down at your building.
All done. Right. So any members of the subcommittee have questions? Councillor Bundon.
Yes, question to Mr. Verdon with regard to the damage and vandalism. Was that reported to the police at all, and did via 101 or any other measures, and did they respond in any way?
I'm not sure whether it was reported to the police. It was dealt with by my local colleagues. We have had issues in the past which have been reported, but as you might imagine, it tends to be a pretty low level. It doesn't get much of a response as a result of that, because often there's little evidence. Sorry, there is evidence of the damage. There's little evidence of who are the perpetrators.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
No. Okay, can I now ask the objectors to present their case? First, Councillor McAvoy.
Is the gentleman opposite the only person that we're addressing? The gentleman speak?
They're all able to speak.
But they're not doing a presentation?
No, I don't think so.
No, I've outlined. I'm here to represent the applicants.
Yeah.
Just if I would like one more question to address to one of the other gentlemen. Is that possible or not?
Oh, if it's a question, go on then.
Well, I've never been to one of these. I don't really know.
Sorry, ma'am. Can I invite you to put your microphone on, because otherwise it won't be recorded.
Sorry about that. The question I really want to ask is just perhaps to help the panel as to the credibility of the gentleman opposite, in particular Mr. Sorrell, because I just wonder, Mr. Sorrell, why, when this all started, and I know this is not quite to do with the licence, but it's to do with the credibility of you carrying forward any promises you may make to the panel in getting a licence. I just wonder why, when all of this started many, many months ago, and concerns were raised with you by the National Park, that you gave assurances that the development was not going ahead. As a result of that, I wrote to all my concerned residents saying no need to worry, no need to do anything, because we've been given assurances that the development is not going ahead. And it went ahead without you telling anybody, just carrying on doing what you're wanting. I'm just trying to demonstrate to the panel the credibility or lack of credibility of the gentleman in charge of carrying forward promises that have been made to me as a county councillor, to Steve Avery as head of planning at the National Park. And I know it doesn't need planning, but this is the run up to it. It's just to help you with your view of how credible the answers are from the opposition. That's really what I wanted to say to Mr. Sorrell.
Thank you for the question. I don't believe I've had any direct correspondence with you at all. I have dealt with that. This has been dealt with by the land agent and Aldred, who is the owner of the estate, have corresponded with you directly. And I certainly never made any assertion that it was not going ahead.
You're quite correct. I personally haven't had dealings with you, but you've had dealings with Steve Avery. So I have gone through Steve Avery, who's gone through you. And if I can just read a little email from Steve Avery when we brought to his attention.
Councillor McAvoy, you're verging on to making statements again about your case. You're not asking questions.
Okay,
this is questions.
So the question is, according to Steve Avery, that you did give assurances that this wasn't going ahead, and when we found the advertising still on the website, Steve Avery said, I'm hoping this advertisement predates that decision not to go ahead, but he'll double check it. So there was communication. That was the communication you had with him. I'm quite happy to leave it at that. I just would like the panel to be aware of whether or not there's any credibility coming, in particular from Mr. Sorrell.
I don't think there's a question there for you to answer, to be honest. It's now for you to present your case, if there's any more to say beyond that.
Needless to say, this is not the place I want to be. So, as I say, to be honest, I actually find this a very sad state of affairs between a usually responsible and considerate local landowner and some local residents in Calshot who have been and will continue to be affected by this development. A development that is unlikely ever to have been given planning permission if it hadn't been for the government extending permitted development rights to 56 days. And with regret, it seems that Pop-Up Limited have not served Cadland well. Having said that, I am well aware that I can only object to the granting of an alcohol licence on specific grounds. I consider that 3 of the 4 licensing objectives are likely to be infringed. They are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, and the prevention of public nuisance. With regard to the prevention of crime and disorder, I am already aware of some vandalism to the Landmark Trust boundary fence. Of course, there's no proof that this was done by guests from the pop-up hotel, but as far as I'm aware, it hasn't happened before. There will inevitably be an eclectic group of guests paying a lot of money to glamper Calshot, but contrary to the applicant's comment that it is not exactly the cheapest place to stay, and that in turn will serve to ensure that their guests will be well behaved and not cause any issues, my experience of others being able to pay a lot of money for a service is not a guarantee of good behaviour. It's often quite the opposite. With regard to public safety, During the summer months, Calshot Spit is extremely busy with all sorts of traffic, cars, motorbikes, bicycles, caravans and trailers with jet skis, small boats and sailboards, to name just a few. All this traffic has to leave the Spit via the narrow one-way Hillhead Road, which runs alongside the site, which is situated on a dangerous right-hand bend. Anyone wandering in and out of the site under the influence of alcohol would be a danger to themselves and many others. And let's not forget the immediate proximity of the sea. Prevention of public nuisance. The photographs give the impression that few properties are in close proximity to the site. This is not the case. There are many properties that can't be seen in the photograph, and the site backs onto a residential area. The properties you can see, there are just 3 of them, are actually situated in Hillhead along the road there, and as I say, you can see those in the photo, as well as a few other individual properties, and not least the famous Luttrell's Tower. The restaurant is not a solid structure and cannot be soundproofed. It includes a large open-air patio area, and serving alcohol from 11 in the morning until 11 at night is just irresponsible. Noise nuisance is inevitable and an unreasonable intrusion on the lives of local residents. If the panel is mindful to grant the alcohol licence, which I prefer them not to, but if they are mindful to grant the licence, I would ask, please, at the very least, considering reducing the number of hours requested.
Thank you, Councillor McAvoy. Mr. Verdon, do you make your case?
Thank you. The Landmark Trust is a historic buildings charity which rescues and restores architecturally and historically important buildings throughout the UK and Italy, which we let for short stay accommodation. It acquired and subsequently restored the Grade 2 star, so that puts it in the sort of top 10% of listed buildings in the UK, in 1968, and we've run it ever since as self-catering holiday accommodation. The money that it generates goes to our other charitable purposes of restoring and rescuing buildings, and therefore the income generation, especially during the summer months, is incredibly important to us. The problem I have with this application is that I have to inform people that there is an activity going on on our boundary, which may very well impact upon their stay. And I think that many people would be very happy with a camping site next door. However, when you actually introduce late night drinking and eating, it does change the whole emphasis of the experience of being there. And the provision of alcohol does attract a different sort of clientele to one who might very well go to a building, to a campsite where there is no such alcohol, even if they have to provide it for themselves. And as a result of that, we are likely to suffer a loss, because if I have sold the building to our guests on the basis that it is a quiet, peaceful coastal location, to be disturbed and inconvenienced by enthusiastic neighbours is something that they quite rightly would come back and ask for refunds on the money that they've paid. So coming to the 3 points that really concern us, and this licensing application, the prevention of crime and disorder, we've already seen a low-level amount of vandalism, and we are noticing that there is more debris left on our part of the beach, which might just be circumstances, but it might be linked back to this. We're also very concerned about the provision of fire, the arrangements for fire, and how they are going to be managed, because that is a very dry bank above the beach there, and there is an awful lot of leaf mulch that is from the home oaks, which is very dry and easily set fire to. We are very concerned about what provisions have been made in respect of that, and whether they are adequate for the purpose. We are told that there are no campfires, but we've already heard that there are fires on the beach that have been managed. The fact is that introducing large numbers of people to an area which has got poor road infrastructure, a one-way system, and access limited by the sea on one side is going to lead to issues and problems, and we will suffer as a result of that. We are also concerned about the fact that the inability to get this application in on time and the tremendous rush to get all of these things sorted doesn't give us a lot of confidence in the ability of the operators to run an efficient site, and I think that we will suffer as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verdon. Do the applicants have any questions, the objectors?
Yeah, just a couple. How many cancellations, Mr. Verder, have you had since the 9th of July?
We haven't had any cancellations, but we've had to tell people that there is a site next door, and that we have tried to manage people's expectations as a result of that. We're not going to get cancellations because most people will not be aware of the extent of what is there.
Okay. And then both of you in turn, please. Have there been any specific incidents directly linked to both the site and the sale of alcohol since the site opened on the 9th of July? For example, well, either of you. So, for example, you talked about the noise from the restaurant. Has anybody had occasion to specifically complain that they have, in fact, been disturbed? Has anybody, in fact, been drunkenly run over or anything like that that's been brought to either of your attention over the last 4 weeks?
The building is occupied by our guests who have not communicated any of that to us. We're not there on site to monitor it.
No, in fact, my residents haven't necessarily complained about the restaurant. They've complained about the noise. Is it coming from the restaurant? Is it coming from the site? I don't know, but they are being disturbed by noise on the site. I can't say it's from the restaurant, but it is from the site.
I've got no other questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does the members of the committee have any questions? No. Right. I now invite the objectors, Mr. Verdon and Councillor McAvoy, to sum up your cases, if you have anything additional to add.
I've got nothing more to add.
No.
Well, I suppose, to be honest, Chairman, I haven't got any more to add other than the fact that, frankly, I've got no confidence in the operators. I do not trust that they will stick to what they have said they have done, but that's my personal opinion from communications that I have. But at the very least, I do urge you to just look again at 12 hours possible drinking on site in an area where there is nowhere to drink within walking distance. There are no pubs, other restaurants anywhere close by. So just at least consider reducing the hours. I think the hours that are being asked for are completely unreasonable.
Thank you, Councillor McAvoy. Mr. Day, would you like to sum up your case?
I'm going to be very brief, sir. Just to address one point that was raised with regard to matters of fire safety. As I'm sure you're aware or would be advised by your legal advisor, under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Control Order of 2005, any condition on a premises licence relating to matters of fire safety that are covered by the order are of no effect. The fire brigade have their own legislation. There is in place here a full fire risk assessment management plan, which, with the greatest of respect, is simply not relevant to the application that is before you today. The final point that I would make is one of evidence. You will be aware that in addition to the councillor and Mr Werner, who've come along here today, that there were a significant number of representations received from local people living in the area. None of them are here today. I would venture to suggest that had their worst fears before the site actually opened had materialised, that they would have literally been hammering on that door over there to come in and to tell you what an appalling experience they've had, how dreadful it's all been, and to urge you to put a stop to it. It's called evidence. There is no evidence that this site has caused any problem at all. Indeed, its mere existence has on one occasion that we can point to actually prevented a problem which would not have been prevented had they not been there. On the basis of the evidence, I would invite you please to grant the application as applied for. Thank you very much for your time and that of your colleagues.
Thank you, Mr Day. Before I adjourn, just ask each party if you feel you've had a fair hearing, Mr Day and your partners.
You have treated us both fairly and very courteously, sir, and your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr Verden.
Yes, thank you for your time.
Councillor McAvoy.
It's a very scary place.
Thank you for your attendance. I now declare the meeting adjourned. The subcommittee will retire to consider the decision and give written reasons for decision within 5 working days, but we'll do it as soon as possible.